Vasishta continued. The characteristic of one who is free from the fever of ignorance and whose heart is calm and cool on account of self-knowledge is that he is not tempted by pleasure. Spiritual practice or enlightenment practice is about being at the center. It's about being at the center of what is going on. Usually we're off-center. Usually we're identifying with our ideas about what is going on. Like there's a party going on somewhere else and we want to be at that party. We don't know that there's a party going on somewhere else, but we believe that there is. So this is the fever of ignorance. Ignorance is the belief that there's a party going on somewhere and we want to get to that party. The party we imagine is where it's at, where it's all going down. But the party's actually right here. This is where it's all happening. It's all happening right here. And once we realize that, we lose the fever of ignorance and we become calm and cool. So this pleasure is this idea that there's something out there. Well, first of all, that there is something out there, and that one of these things that are out there, or situations, is going to give us fulfillment. Enough of all this talk about knowledge and wisdom, which are words and the notions indicated by those words, without a corresponding truth. Nirvana or liberation is the non-experience of egosense. Let this truth be clearly understood. It's all like a big dream that we believe is true. Notions of a world out there, of a me here. This is what knocks us off centre. This is what takes us away from realization of ourself. Some people might misunderstand what I'm saying about spirituality as somehow a rejection of the world and just focusing on yourself. It's absolutely not that, because yourself is part of that world illusion. Yourself, your ego sense, is part of the world illusion. And if there's a part of you which objects to that, then observe it. Observe that part of you that's objecting and consider its nature. Then you're on your way to becoming what I call centered in your own awareness, your own sense of being. It's this awareness which gives you a sense of being. So we want to get away from notions, all notions, not just of a world out there, of an ego here, a me here, but also all spiritual notions, notions of liberation, of nirvana, and all the rest of it. Come back to your own sense of being, your own experiential awareness. Just as the man who is awake does not derive any pleasure from the objects he saw during his dream, we do not derive any pleasure from the objects of this world appearance. The dream experience is a great analogy. In fact, it's more than an analogy. It's more than an analogy because the same mechanism which allows us to perceive in dreams is at work when we're awake. The same mechanism which creates an objective world, or the idea of an objective world, is what is working while we're awake as well. So it's more than an analogy. We don't base our life around what we saw in a dream. And if we did, then our behaviour would be highly suspect. But what's going on in the world is just as substantial as what's going on in a dream. We look back on the dream as something ephemeral, something unreal. But at the time, it's completely real completely convincing. It can be traumatic or highly pleasurable. So let's not dismiss, well, if we're going to dismiss dreams, then in the same way we can dismiss the dream of so-called waking life. This is what happens when we come back to the centre. We realise that everything is not really of any concern to us. We play the game, we go through the motions, but we know that it's not reality. Just as vampires and goblins arise in dark forest, all these 14 worlds arise in the darkness of ignorance and delusion. The 14 worlds is part of the Hindu cosmology. When the truth is investigated, the goblin is seen not to exist, and when the truth concerning these 14 worlds is investigated, they are seen to be pure consciousness. When you really look into it, if you believe there's a goblin in the dark or a monster under your bed, well, you investigate it. You find there's nothing there. Same with the physical world. I'm not suggesting we all get involved in building big atomic colliders, particle accelerators. We can investigate the reality of our own beliefs. We have to be honest here. It requires a certain emotional bravery. There are notions and ideas we just cling to, and I don't just mean religious notions. I mean notions that there's an external world, notions that there's a me here, notions that I have a body. All these things can be investigated and challenged, and when done so we find that they are pure consciousness. The objects surely do not exist independently, and hence they are unreal. They are pervaded by the consciousness which is the subject. If there was no consciousness, we cannot even say anything exists, because the concept of existence wouldn't exist without consciousness. We can hypothesize a universe without life, but where does that hypothesis come from? It comes from consciousness as well. They are pervaded by the consciousness which is the subject. There is no object, only subject. Normally we have this division between subject and object, but there's only subject. But then, since there is no object in relation to which consciousness can be considered the subject, the latter too can be said to be non-existent as a subject. Something which cannot be described exists. We don't even want to call consciousness the subject. We have to go beyond this conceptualization to the direct realization, to the essential centeredness of our own being.